If you're thinking about cleaning your swimming pool, don't do it. All right, with jokes aside, we deal with a whole gamut of materials. We've covered that a lot in some of our other segments about materials. So let's use some examples. Things not to do with your DuraVac is to typically move wet material, wet, damp, moist materials. There are some exceptions, so let's just cover them. What I would like to even specify even further is wet, damp, moist materials that are soluble. What does that mean? Soluble means something that will melt or dissolve in a liquid. If your material is bathing in water, the issue is there's not a lot of oxygen molecules between the particles. Let's use sand. If sand is in water, sand is really easy to move. If you put it in water, it's going to have a really hard time to move because it gets at least 3 times denser. And there's no oxygen between the sand molecules. So it's really hard to move using a vacuum system. Someone will call me and say, hey, Anti, I've removed most of the water out of my sand, so I've got damp sand. And at some point you said, as long as it's not water soluble. You are right. You're right. You can move damp sand. Why? Because damp sand is not soluble. It won't melt in water. But what's going to happen is that you'll need 3 times more energy and power to move damp sand. Why? Because it's 3 times denser and there's not a lot of oxygen between the molecules. If you don't believe me, try to shovel damp sand and you call me later and tell me how much energy that took. So that's the capsule. Really what to look out for are wet, damp, and moist materials, and especially materials that are soluble in water. Those are no-nos. One of the things we don't cover a lot actually are very round spherical materials. Something that looks like a sphere or a ball are, believe it or not, very hard to move. From golf balls to ball bearings, kind of hard to move because actually in order to move material, you need air to kind of drag the material forward. But if you've got a very slick surface or a sphere, air actually just slides over the surface and makes it very hard to move. But otherwise, DuraVac can do most of what you want to bring up to us. But really, this segment was to cover things such as damp, moist, and wet material. Those are typically no-nos. Remember, we sell vacuum systems that are operated by human beings. If you're calling us with a material that is too hot and dangerous to a human being, typically we want to treat our vacuum systems like humans, like we don't want to burn them out. But not only that, at a technical level, very warm or hot materials first will burn the filters and actually can cause catastrophic thermal expansion in our blowers and our vacuum pumps. So it's a big no-no. We do get phone calls of cleaning up grease and oil. This sort of falls in the category of wet, damp, moist. Well, grease and lubricant is just outright solutions and liquids. If you think about DuraVac, think about dry bulk material. Dry bulk material that is not soluble in water, should it ever be damp, moist, or wet. What about really big stuff? There are limitations physically. So your physical limitation is either your flexible hose, the diameter of it, or actually your piping network. So our rule of thumb is that typically the hose size and the piping size needs to be 2.5 times bigger than your flex hose diameter and your lowest pipe size diameter. So here's an example. 1-inch gravel, you'll need 2 to 2.5 inch hoses and 2 and 2.5 inch piping to be able to move 1-inch gravel. This is a good rule of thumb, but again, if you're not sure, call your DuraVac representative and we'll make sure that we size it up correctly for you. There is also the consideration of fibrous-y, stringy, clingy material, long strips. Oftentimes what we've discovered over time is that long, fibrous-y, stringy, clingy material develops static electricity as we're conveying it. So that in and of itself is a challenge. So we may need to go into other special types of features and accessories to be able to diminish the static electricity that is generated from moving that type of material. So what's important when you're dealing with stringy, fibrous-y, long, clingy material is to contact your Duravac representative. We will really look at the application one by one and evaluate and assess if that's the correct application for us to resolve.